so that we have that. Okay, great. So just to quickly tell you, people who've not attended our GF Ideas webinar series before, this is the 19th webinar in the series. And what we've been trying to do is get experts from the Indian food industry across the value chain, investors, people from the corporations, people who are researchers, scientists, and get them to share their knowledge and insights with us so that entrepreneurs in our community, innovators in our community can learn from all their knowledge that they've built over the years. And one of such experts today with us is Keyur Bhatia, and he's a guest speaker for today. So a very warm welcome, Keyur. Let me give a quick introduction of Keyur as well to all of our attendees. So Keyur is a passionate food entrepreneur, and he thrives on creating innovative sales and distribution solutions for food brands and for their market entry. His company, TJ UK Trade Networks, holds a leadership position in food distribution for over 2 decades. Since the 1990s, he's been focusing on major channels, GT, MT, e-commerce, star hotels, restaurants, and caterers, entire HoReCa and retail segments, and represents more than 50 plus brands, including the likes of Nestle, Unilever, Baskin Robbins, and has direct reach with 10,000 plus premium retail outlets, as well as 5,000 plus restaurants and food service accounts in Mumbai. He has a very strong sub-distribution and retail chain network in the western part of Maharashtra, and is rapidly building other retail distribution networks across metro cities in India as well. He's also the president of the Food Service Distributors Association of India and Mumbai Catering Suppliers Association. And he's been involved with our community and definitely is a mission aligned stakeholder and understands what the alternative protein sector is all about. So we today hope to, learn from his insights about CPG retail distribution and how we can, take those insights and apply them to our sector so that the acceleration of the smart protein sector is faster than it ever is. And I have with me Varun Deshpande, who's the managing director of GFI India, who will be helping me to bridge insights and tie them to our smart protein sector as well. So a very warm welcome, Keyur.
Thank you. Thank you for that great introduction, Shardul and Varun. Thank you for this opportunity. I really look forward to this session today.
Yeah, and
Perfect. So
Keyur,
with, yeah.
sorry, I just wanted to say, Shardul, before you go ahead, this is a really, really important topic, especially at this exact stage of the industry, because several entrepreneurs are now coming to market. And I think they're going to find, they are already finding that distribution is a very, very difficult topic in a market that's as fragmented as India, both culturally as well as from an infrastructure standpoint. I mean, there's this often repeated meme almost that every 200 kilometers in India, your language and your palate changes, right? So that's one thing to note. And then also from the infrastructure standpoint, there's a lot of challenges that we'll talk about through the course of this webinar. So Shardul, back to you.
Perfect. So just to tell the audience about the structure for the first 45 minutes, next 45 minutes, we are going to have questions that were sent through the feedback from the registration from and from what we know the entrepreneurs are looking at. And then in the last 15 minutes, we'll do a live Q&A, and you can submit your questions through the Q&A button. So without further ado, my first question to Keyur is, Keyur, so TJ UK is one of the largest, India's largest sub-distribution networks, right? And it operates in more than 42 cities, and it's handling products ranging from dry to chill to frozen, so across all food categories. So to start with, can you tell us a little bit about how this distribution is different, like the food distribution is different from other fast moving goods in India, and how does TJUK add value to this specific thing?
So, talking on the broad topic about food distribution being separate from or how it is different than other CPG products, um, I would say that food is first perishable. That is what makes it different. And second, it is usually very, very temperature sensitive and sensitive to humidity. So storing conditions have to be right. And that is what is very different about food distribution. FIFO is something which is very critical in our business because shelf lives can be as little as 2 days, or even in some cases 1 day, to a max of typically 1 year. So uh, that is one thing you have to be mindful about. So at TJ UK, we handle all kinds of food products, all the temperatures, right from frozen, chilled to ambient products. We also have a fourth temperature, which is for chocolates, which is at about 18 degrees centigrade. So that's basically air conditioned. And all our trucks are basically multi-temperature. So, we have a truck which will have a minus temperature. It will also have a chill temperature. and it'll have an ambient compartment as well. So on the same truck, we will deliver multiple products. This makes life very easy, right from the time you place an order. So instead of going to multiple distributors and receiving multiple shipments, you will receive a single shipment with all your requirements. So that is what uh, TJUK does.
Got it, Varun. Next question.
And if we talk about, sorry, so if we talk about things like route optimization, fleet management, demand forecasting, on all those parameters, any distribution company runs on the same logic, on the same principles. These are basically the main difference between food distribution and other products distribution. Uh, the other thing that you have to be mindful of is that India is a very very price sensitive market, so everything is offered at a very very low margin. So the margin through the value chain is really tight, and so having the right product mix, like in food, you can sell atta for 30 rupees a kilo and a cheese which is exotic at maybe 600 to 1400 rupees a kilo. So you need to have a right product mix for distribution to make sense.
Got it. Yeah, thanks, Keyur. And there's obviously a lot of complexity that comes with that. So you need essentially an integrated partner like yourself who can provide some of that backing to understand what the product mix should be, and how you manage your own product mix on your end. Now, as we've had discussions before in the past, you've always focused on these kind of new and innovative food categories, and you've had to work closely with the manufacturers during the early stages of a lot of these food categories, as we've discussed. So I think this would be a very relevant question for the entrepreneurs in the audience. How do you evaluate a new and upcoming category and the startups or the manufacturers in the space before you collaborate with them?
So firstly is we evaluate the founders. So integrity is a very very important part of this, right? So when a distributor takes up a role of distribution, he's essentially taking a leap of faith, right? So he believes that the product will sell, that there is going to be consumer offtake of the product which he's storing, and he's risking his capital for, because typically a distributor will always carry the inventory risk on his own books. So, we meet a lot of energetic young founders. I'm addressing today's, I've been given to understand that a large part of the audience today is upcoming entrepreneurs. And so I'm going to address them first. So we see a lot of energetic young entrepreneurs with great ideas. But one thing that I would like to tell all of them is that please be mindful of, uh, you know, when you launch a product, is that product going to sell by itself without any support? When it's standing on the shelf, does it have the right reason for a consumer to go for it or not? Right? People get too enamored by their own ideas, and excited about what they want, what they have to offer to the market, without actually doing a proper survey of the market. That is this product really fulfilling a need in the market, and if so, how, at what price points, at what quality, what pack sizes. All these things are very very important. So when we look at a new company, we will look at the founders, we look at the backing that they have, because marketing is becoming more and more important in this business. Or if they do not have marketing dollars, they should have a great product, right? Finally, our business is all about volumes. So if we can't generate volumes, the economies of scale just does not kick in. So this is very, very important from a distributor's perspective.
Yeah. And as you're speaking, actually, Keyur, I'm thinking about a lot of the the consumer surveys or the market insights work that we've done, which is broader for the whole category. It's not specifically for an individual product. And it seems that there are some drivers for consumption, right? So you have a large cohort of urban, upwardly mobile people who are monitoring the international market. They're seeing that the protein market is witnessing a huge shift in consumer demand. there's a portion of it that's going from animal protein to plant protein, etc. I mean, especially in North America, Europe, and starting to pick up a lot in Asia as well. We're seeing a lot of essentially alternative proteins start to dominate the market in terms of the mind share of the consumer, right? Um, I wanted to ask you, from your experience in the food sector, how do you rate the potential of a new sector like plant-based foods, for example, in a place like India, which is quite conservative generally?
So, let's look at, so Indians in general consume less protein. I think that's a given fact. You, Varun and Shardul, you are the proponents of alternate plant-based protein in the market. So, you know it better than most other people that India is protein deficient. And we are a very large community of vegetarians. We don't consume so much meat, and hence there is definitely a growing demand and need, and people are getting more and more aware, and thanks to the corona phenomena, even more so, that people are now more mindful of their personal health and hygiene. Even sustainability has become such a big topic now, you know so I definitely see that there is a shift towards this. You see it on all the restaurant menus. You go to any QSR chain, they will always have something to offer for the healthy, more conscious consumer. Even on Swiggy and Zomato, which are the most popular um, channels, you will see you have now dedicated health sections for people who are more conscious or conscious eating. So, having said that, I want you to be mindful of this, that India is let me put it this way, we are very, very finicky in terms of our eating habits, unlike the West. So we have a palate which is, for the lack of any other words, I would say more evolved, or more pampered, right? So we like to have our food with the right spice mix, with the right texture, with the right temperature. All of those things are very, very, it's very nuanced, to enter into this sector. So if we can together satisfy that need of the consumer, then India is a bigger market than any other place in the world. I mean, we're a $1 trillion retail economy, and 20% or 30% of that is food alone. So it's an extremely large market, and I think there's a definite shift. So places like what's the name, uh, Dibella Coffee. So I was there the other day, and they had two options of plant-based milk. Starbucks started with it, and now everybody's aping them because there's demand. And incidentally, Starbucks is amongst the biggest consumers of plant-based milk in the country today. So I mean that is the proof of what's happening. But going by the McDonald's model, because what happened to all those famous meat companies from the US is they rode on McDonald's and Burger Kings of the world to give them an entry into that market, to get the product acceptance. So uh, we would have to find such champions who are actually going to increase consumption through trials, uh, and that for that I would say the food service sector is the best route to introduce your products in the market. You can get the volumes at a reasonably less price. You can entice trials, and that will actually expand the market.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
great, great points. Sorry, go ahead.
McDonald's and Burger King, most of the international food chains have not penetrated a very large audience as of now. They're still small relatively. When you speak of the larger context of what India represents, they are a very small part of the market. But if you could, probably make like the patty which goes inside the kati roll, which is plant based, which usually always is plant based, right? But give an alternate to a chicken or a mutton or whatever it is, I think it would be a fantastic idea.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Keyur, you highlighted a couple of things right there, right? So you said essentially there might be a couple of companies, a couple of examples which break down the door for the rest of the market, and they might launch in a McDonald's or a KFC, Pizza Hut, Burger King. We've seen this with Impossible Foods, Beyond Meat, etc. internationally. Now, coming from your context as a distributor, there have also been kind of case studies in distribution, right? Where you've built awareness of a completely new product in a new part of the country, or even generally in the entire country. Let's talk about some of the things that we've discussed in the past: a Cornetto, Neutralite, the General Mills cake premixes. I mean, some of these things are actually new, like the cake premixes and stuff are new behaviors, right, from a consumer. So can you share some success stories from these launches, which could be useful for startups or manufacturers in plant-based meats? Because without distribution, you can't actually be counted as a success story.
Absolutely, you're bang on. So Varun, if you look at all the largest FMCG companies of the world, or CPG companies of the world, or even the largest food companies, I always say that a very very large percentage of them are actually distribution companies. You know, they're not just food manufacturers and food innovators, but they are great at distribution. So distribution is key to success. That is completely undeniable. Um, and going by, I mean, talking about some examples of the success that we've had introducing new product categories in the market, uh, products like which would absolutely hold true for this example is McCain's. So when McCain's came to India, that was back in 1994, and after 7 long years in the market, McCain's was a business of about 3 lakhs rupees in Bombay, as I remember it, or maybe 4 lakhs, something like that. It was a very small number. After 7 years of consistently being there, their largest client and account was McDonald's. So they'd really not entered into the Indian market well. So we came up with a strategy where, uh, we converted the humble French fry in India to a dish which could be served by itself, right? Otherwise, French fries in India was always sold as upwas ka khana, or it was sold as a side dish to a sandwich or a burger or something like that. Uh, but and the food service guys were very shy of touching a product which was nearly 100 rupees a kilo, when actually aloo was at 8 rupees and 5 rupees and 6 rupees a kilo back then. I'm talking about somewhere in 2000. So here was the challenge that, how do you expand this category? Because these guys are saying that who's going to pay you 100 rupees for an 8 rupee a kilo aloo? So we said that, here's a product which stays good after you fry it for a good 20 minutes. It's good to nice and warm and crispy, unlike the aloo fries which you make, which become very soggy and oily. So you can actually make a dish out of this, and a restaurant owner is always looking at the multiple that he gets on his food cost and how much more he can sell. So that thing stuck a bell with a lot of people, and that was one of the biggest things that we did to achieve success. And after a particular point of time, once you penetrated a market, you're going to get critical mass, right? So there's herd mentality, because those 5 restaurants did it, so the other 5 want to ape them, and they want to have that product on their plate too. And the other thing which we did for McCain, because we were the distributors in Mumbai, and their headquarters was in Delhi back then. So even Delhi was a very very small market where all the CXOs of the company were seated. We expanded the reach. So we went into multiple channels. So till that point of time, McCain's was sold only in the five-star hotels and the very high-end fine dine restaurants or QSR chains. That was the three places where McCain's had entered. We took it to the Shetties, the Shetty Udupi restaurants. We took it to the caterers of the city. We took it to retail as well. So in fact, they didn't have a retail product at all back then. So we sold larger packs in retail. We got some champions in Mumbai. Um, you know, at that point of time, modern trade was non-existent in 2000. It had just about started off. So you had to go to the A-grade gourmet stores, the Cheda stores, the society stores, and the likes. So every area we would create one key store into a retailer who would store our products, and that's how consumption started. Another interesting thing which helped us grow that business. I'm stressing on this point, Varun, because I think meat is going to be a very very big category. Uh, I mean, the plant-based meat is going to be a very large category here. So I think the McCain example or case study would really help these entrepreneurs. So what we did is, who are the biggest consumers of fries? Kids, undeniably, right? Even today, even back then. And I think so they were the largest audience. So to make them happy, we came up with these smileys. I mean, McCain came up with these smileys. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're like these round circle with two holes and a smile.
Yeah,
And this became
they're everywhere, right? I mean, I think at this point they are like synonymous with frozen food in India. You think of the McCain smiley at this point.
absolutely. So the way to introduce that was, so we went to the small caterers and all the small banquet halls in the city, typically the places where birthday parties were happening. So we gave them a great deal. So we focused our efforts in developing that market. So because Smiley became so popular, that helped us get into the people's homes. That was the biggest challenge. So the retail success was based on the Smiley success. Then we came up with alphabet fries, although we had to withdraw that because that product was being imported into the country. It was a difficult, challenging product since there would be a lot of breakage. So you don't want a broken A or a broken V. Uh, Nobody would like to have that product. So Smileys became the mainstay of the product which we entered into the market with. Uh, to name some other successes or case studies, uh, we entered the market back in 95 or 96, it was, that Rich's non-dairy cream, which is a global leader in the cream which is used typically on desserts and cakes, also, of course, now used for cooking and all other applications of cream, was imported into this country. So this product was about four times the price of the traditional B2B price of a dairy cream. So we found it very difficult to enter into the B2B market. And back then, there were not so many home bakers, although there were enough of them. But so we had to uh, take a back foot and re-strategize as to how we are going to enter into this market. So what we did there was that we went to all the cooking classes which were there in Bombay. So these were not like huge institutes alone, right? Because there were very few of them. Back then there was IHN, there was Raija, and then there was one more in somewhere in Shivaji Park. So there were a handful of them, maybe just two or three, which were churning out maybe 150 new professionals every year. So to introduce this product, which was not finding acceptance in the B2B space, we went to these classes. The biggest problem with cream back then, and even today with fresh cream, before Tetra Pak cream was launched in this market, was that the shelf life of that product was just 24 hours, which means your desserts, which you would cook and make, 24 hours, yeah. So it would curdle up after that point of time. So your desserts would go bad if you made a fresh cream dessert, and they are the most loved desserts. Cakes with like Black Forest or pineapple pastry, which was back then the biggest sellers in the market. So we went to the housewives, the home bakers. I remember at some point of time we were servicing about 17,000 house bakers, home bakers in this city, and that gave us a foothold into this market. Eventually, we were very, very sure that the B2B side of things that would change. They would appreciate what the product. They would initiate trials with our products, and finally, what happened is that they could sell more fresh cream pastries because otherwise, back then, the market was mainly all margarine based products or buttercream as they call it. So and even the Dutch truffle, which is the most popular back then, even today it is the most popular pastry, was essentially made with buttercream. So that was another story. Uh, General Mills introduced this cake premixes. Uh, this was maybe sometime in 2002 or so. Back then, the entire eggless cake market, which was very big in Bombay. So Bombay has a very large, unusually large number of vegetarians. So eggless cakes was big back then. It's big now as well. So everybody had to have their own secret sauce, their secret recipe to make these cakes, right? Ideally, people would use condensed milk or some form of milk protein in it to make a good eggless cake. So, but you had to depend on the skill of your chef, who would dish out different kinds of products depending on the time of the day, depending on his mood, and you had no consistency in the business, right? So the premixes took about a good 6 years or 7 years for us to get any substantial volumes in that. Again, the bakery business, is traditionally driven by these, what do they call them? Ustads. Yeah, they're called Ustad. So the master chef is called an Ustad in a bakery. So the Ustad would typically be somebody who's a more traditional guy, not very exposed to what's happening globally. He's learned this from his Ustad or his guru, and this tradition continued, and they were wary of touching this product. The price of making a scratch recipe was one third the price of buying a ready-made product off the shelf, the premix. But eventually, consistency always is always a very big thing for any any chain, any food chain worth its salt. You don't want to have one experience in one end of the city and another experience, a different taste at the other end of the city with the same brand name. So consistency won, and people agreed. And today I can say that 90%, or maybe 99%, I would say, of all the cakes which you eat today are made from premixes, right? So what it needed was conviction, honestly. In the case of all these manufacturers and brand owners, and patience to build the market, and thinking out of the box and saying, how am I going to do this differently? And that succeeded eventually. We built TJ UK today. Whatever leadership we enjoy in this market is all thanks to our ability to pick, uh, um, you know, new concepts which would work in the market, and our conviction that that these products will win eventually. We will get the market shares, and that's what helped us get our leadership position. And I must say that our mojo is very strong in that, in selling new concepts in the business.
I mean, it's fascinating, right? Because, like you said, at this point, it's not a question. I mean, you wouldn't, as a chef, anyone who's opening a bakery business or whatever, premix is not even a question at this point. Most cakes that one would eat today are made from premix, to the extent that at this point, I would wonder, like operationally, in terms of quality, why would you do anything except use a premix? But it was not guaranteed for 7 years, is what you're saying, simply
Yes,
because the volumes were not there and the education. I mean, that's fascinating. For a new category like this, it's important that we remain quite patient, right? And
absolutely.
when we're talking about patience, I think, given that India is a country with terrible infrastructure in many ways, right? If we're talking about cold storage, transport, what are some of the challenges that you encounter in distribution and storage of, let's say, chilled or frozen products? Because many of these products that will come out will be chilled or frozen. And how are retailers, food service businesses, how are they adapting to these products more and more now?
So before we switch to this, I just thought of something which I would like to make as an example here. Is that when Kellogg's entered into India, they entered with a bang, right? And they had the biggest marketing budget that any company had ever. And now, after maybe 25 years that they've been in India or longer, maybe, they're selling upma. So, guys, when you're thinking of new products, think global but act local. This, as cliched as it is, but I don't think there's a better example which I can give you. Now, talking about, I mean, answering your question on the challenges for the frozen or the temperature controlled infrastructure in this country, yes, like you rightly said, it is very, very poor. Um, and if you look at the retail shelves, the most premium retail space or retail shelf is always the temperature controlled one, and most of this is hogged by cold drinks. It is hogged by dairy products. It's hogged by ice creams, and so these guys hardly have any space. And most of these investments in these refrigeration assets have been done by brand owners. And again, taking an example of Mumbai or Delhi or Bangalore, where real estate is so expensive. So you have tight stores, small stores, and they'll have two refrigerators with whatever is the most popular thing, whatever gives the most money turns. So retail is very clearly the business of real estate. It is not the business of selling products, right? It is how many turns does a product get. That is how the retailer is ensured the best return on his equity, his capital, his resources. So uh, it is very, very challenging. But this is a matter of evolution, the way I see it. If you look at, forget US and Europe, where frozen foods is a very big category. But even if you look at China or you look at Thailand, most of these places you'll have huge alleys and alleys of refrigerated, products and refrigeration. But in India, it's a matter of time when it'll get there. So at this point of time, if you are going to have a product which is frozen or chilled, then you be very, very mindful that it should be a product which is going to give enough money turns or enough rotations in the store, because otherwise it's going to be extremely difficult to penetrate. And
Yeah.
chilled, for that matter, chilled and fresh is the most difficult category. So if you are getting into a temperature controlled product and you can design that product to be a frozen product versus a chilled product, you'll be much better off, because typically in the chilled product category, the supply chain is the most sensitive because it cannot bear shock. So you just have a temperature room of say 0 to 4 degrees or 0 to 6 degrees or 2 to 6 degrees. That is the temperature within which that product has to be maintained and delivered. But if you talk of a frozen product, it can start at -22 and will still be good at -8. So you have a much larger room for temperature shocks, right? And which is very, very critical, so that the quality of your product when it goes in the hands of the consumer is still good, and it delivers the promised value to the consumer.
Then, so I mean, a lot of these, Keyur, a lot of these direct to consumer brands, let's say like a Licious or whatever, they've actually had to invest a ton of money in terms of in terms of building out their own supply chain, right? Because as you said, it's a very sensitive supply chain to be able to get to the consumer, or distribution chain to be able to get to the consumer. So, what would you say in terms of these new categories? Should they be looking at going that route, because that's very capital intensive as well?
But that's a much better route, actually, if you ask me, going to direct to consumer. And you look at partnering with people like Super Daily, or all these milk brands which are there. um, uh, Daily Ninja is there. There are a bunch of brands, right? And they go directly to the consumer. So rather than getting into the retail business, if you have a product which can ride on that infrastructure, it would be a big win. And it would be very, very cost efficient to get into it, rather than building your own setup. If you could override these D2C brands, and most of these companies have been heavily funded now. So if they see an entry point, milk has become such a big category, right? Oat milk, almond milk, and all of these wonderful products. The other day, I had a trial of a product which can be boiled. It's a plant-based milk, and it was fantastic. But it had a shelf life after opening it of less than 2 days, right? But till you don't open it, it had a shelf life of a couple of weeks. I don't remember exactly what it was, but my son got it at home, and I love that product. So that product, overriding, the milk delivery guys, and some of them are really doing a great job. So that is a very good supply chain that you should look at.
Yeah, that makes sense, Keyur. Now, once you collaborate with one of these, once you as a distribution business would collaborate with any of these plant-based brands or manufacturers, uh, how do they work with you? What kind of support do you need from them in terms of how your team complements what they do, and how each party adds value essentially to this relationship?
So, like I told you earlier, so when a distribution company is going to take a brand, it is they want assurance that there is going to be market offtake. So that is one thing that you have to be very mindful of. So that is the job of the entrepreneur, the founder of that brand, that they're very, very clear about what their basic value proposition is for the consumer as they think of that new product. We can ensure that, the product reaches the shelves, right? But is it going to sell from that shelf or not is completely, entirely the game of, what the value proposition for the consumer is and what the marketing support is behind that brand. And the same goes for the entire value chain, right? So typically, in many cities, you'll find that there's a multi-layered distribution system where you go to a retailer, then there's a last mile distributor, there's a super stockist, there could even be a CNF agent, and you could have a three-layered structure. Each one of these guys typically would be working at very reasonable costs and variable margins. So what is critical is that there is product offtake. So be mindful of this, and that is what we look for, right? So the product by itself, as a distributor, when I see a product, I would like to see that, okay, there is enough value proposition for the consumer, and the company behind, the company backing it is a company with which not only has the resources, more than the resources, I would say, like I said earlier, integrity is very important here. That they're very, very clear. They know, they are transparent about what their strengths are and what their game plan is, and what they can back and what not. As long as you are transparent with us, we are very, very happy. So, like I told you earlier, at TJ UK, we love innovations, right? We build a company based on building categories of food products, new categories altogether, which very few distribution. I feel that we must have done more categories than a lot of my competitors in the limited time that we've been around. So we love innovation, but is the founder going to be able to back it? Is a very, very big question, right? It does not mean that you have to have a lot of capital every single time, but at least you have a clear game plan. You're pragmatic about what the market is going to need and what you can bring to the table. So that is what we need. What our part of the deal is that we have, for example, in Mumbai, which is our deepest penetrated market, we have a sales team which touches 5,000 stores and upwards every week. Put together through our supply chain, we touch about 20,000 outlets in this city through our sub-distribution network also. And directly, our sales team goes to about 5,000 stores to do bookings. So, we can help you variabilize that cost completely, because field force cost is very, very high in the early days of a brand. Besides this, we could help you strategize your market entry. Which is the market which needs to be prioritized first. So when you talk of the food business, you're talking of general trade, you're talking of modern trade, you're talking of hotels, QSR chains, you're talking of caterers, you're talking of bakeries, you're talking of the exports market. So at TJ UK, we go through all these channels and even more. So we even go into the corporate caterers, we go to the cinema halls, we go to hospitals. So which would be the best fitment for you is something that, and what would you prioritize? So we could help you do that. So that would be what we could definitely help the new brands with. And you can use us as a sounding board for taking these decisions.
Yeah, that all sounds great, Keyur. I think some of the things that people want to know now, and we're getting some questions about this in the chat as well, actually, is, what are some of the most commonly followed stock return policies, average gross margins, good gross margins, credit cycles for these kinds of food sectors, and how different are they for the retail portion, the food service business portion? How does it vary across all of these channels?
So, so that's insider news. Please don't record that. But anyways,
so I mean, if it is in fact, Keyur, if it is in fact confidential, then you shouldn't say it here. People can contact you directly, I think on this call. But if you have some general,
I don't mind saying that, I can give you an idea on that, because I think that information is very valuable for people who are deciding the price points of their products. So I can give you a range. So let's first talk about the retail business, which is general trade and modern trade. So modern trade will typically have need 5% or 10% more than general trade uh, as a margin, as a retailer's margin. So depending on the category of product that you're getting into, the margin could be as little as 20%, which is unrealistic in most cases for new startups and products which are a niche product or considered to be niche products. So you should look at close to a 30% margin for the retailer. A distribution company, which is a last mile distribution company, would typically work at about between 10 and 12% if the product is ambient. If the product is frozen or temperature controlled, then that would you bump it up by another 2-3% points, which would take it to close to 15% on an average. Um, the food service business operates very differently, so they work on price points, right? Because whatever you are selling to them is going to add brands. They're not selling a product as is, in most cases at least. Besides some categories like maybe cold drinks, where they would be selling it as is. Most other products they would use as an ingredient. So over there, you have to have a sharply focused price point. You can use bulk packs and bring your cost down, so that that encourages them to use your products as ingredients. So that's how the food service business works. And the return policies in most cases is 100% uh, returned if the product expires on the shelf. So there is no compromise there. I think the largest brands in this country, without naming them, but you take the top 5 brands, and I can promise you 4 of them, uh, if not more, um, will accept 100% returns from the market. So again, depending on the category of products which you are in, you'll have to create a percentage margin for uh, return goods.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. We just have a couple of further questions before we'll take some further questions from the audience as well. Now, from your experience, could you offer some insights on building distribution and awareness for a new category like the plant-based foods category? So, in term, and I mean this in terms of cities to start with, specific channels, the kinds of products, marketing and promotion, etc. You've hinted at a lot of this throughout the conversation, but what would be your advice on this kind of thing?
So it's very interesting that when you look at the sports category as an example, protein shakes and supplements. So the awareness has gone so deep that they are like India always leapfrogs. Consumption is happening in small cities and towns of Haryana, which is very very surprising. But yes, it's happened. But generally speaking, I think the bigger cities would be the best bet to start with. A lot of companies will, in their enthusiasm to launch their products in the market, will go into multiple cities. I would say stick to Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad, one of these cities, whichever city is native to you and is more cost efficient for you to start your distribution from. So these would be good markets to start. And again, depending on the product. So if we are talking of milk as a product category, I'm using that as an example and an analogy. I would say you must start with retail, because that product everybody understands. It's very very simple, does not need any education. It's about switching. People who are desirous to switch will switch, and it is about making it available in the retail shelves. That's a much larger market to get into. But if you're talking about meats as a category, as an example, then I would say that food service would be a better market for you to get into, because that is where you will make sure the trials happen. Because mind you, as simple as it sounds, doing those tasting sessions, which of course right now you can't do because of the lockdown and because of the current situation, those tasting or promotions as we call them, where these promoters are sitting in high traffic or high footfall areas like malls or supermarkets, that is a very expensive way of entering into the market, right? It's a very expensive marketing tool to use. It seems very, very simple. It works great if your product has a great price point and where you know the minimum ticket size that a consumer is going to buy your product is going to be upwards of maybe 500 rupees or 1,000 rupees. Uh, then you should go for that. Otherwise, use all these traditional ways and ingenious ways of entering into the market.
Got it, Keyur. And I think this is my last general question for you. You're also the president of the Food Service Distributors Association of India and the Mumbai Catering Suppliers Association. So, how could startups engage with these associations, and what kinds of engagements could they have in terms of what kinds of help could these associations provide to innovative solutions here?
So I would be happy to have a bunch of people available, introduce these our members to these new brands, and also do like a webinar like we did today for a particular product category. So we are open to do all of this, and I would definitely encourage them to take this route because that is one way where you get to meet a plethora of people for different ideas, different strengths, and that is how I could help connect them.
Yeah, that would be great. And Keyur, we'll definitely take that offline and discuss how we can make that happen in a systematic way. I will say, I mean, this kind of knowledge is truly invaluable. I think most people that enter a new category like this don't quite understand how difficult it's going to be to get distribution for a product. So thank you so much for sharing all of these insights. Just to kind of sum up the session today, what would be your top 3 to 4 or 5 pieces of advice that would help make a successful, predictable retail or food service or direct to consumer distribution strategy for a plant-based food startup with relatively limited funds and something that's growing but is quite small currently? Because I think that's what would characterize most of the companies in our space.
So, so we spoke about some ways of doing this. So as long as I know, at the risk of repeating myself, um, be very clear about what value proposition you are providing. Okay, India is a market for everybody. Uh, Very often, people get very enticed and excited about entering into niche products, and typically startups with limited funds and young innovators, young entrepreneurs, they want to create a product which is a niche within a niche within a niche, right? So distribution in India is very expensive. Okay, reaching out to people now. Mr. Ambani does not go shopping into a retail supermarket, and if your consumer happens to be Mr. Ambani, reaching him is practically impossible, right? As an extreme example, if I were to make. So do not look at such products. I would first say, look at products which are more easy to understand uh, by the average consumer. Then you are using the might of India in your favor. That would be first. And if your product happens to be this wonderful innovation, which even though it's a niche, needs education, then remember this, that is going means a lot of marketing dollars. Education is not going to come cheap. Media has become very, very expensive. Digital media, which used to be much cheaper earlier, is galloping away in price or in cost. So be mindful of that. Uh, D2C is one of the best channels to enter into this market, right? Because you engage with your audience on a one-on-one basis. So invest in websites, invest in creating your own D2C channel, and that would be one of the best ways. You have a better margin for yourself. Your consumer gets a better deal. So that is a great channel right now to work on. Uh, and when you look at a product which fits both into food service and retail, then food service will generally be a cheaper route to get into the market in terms of, again, investment in marketing. because all that you need there is to convince one guy who's going to be a repeat consumer, and the cost of converting that consumer is some time, patience, some nigris, walking to them, doing all the rounds, doing your trials, doing your sampling, and convincing them to buy that product. So if you have a product which can go into both markets, that is the way. And if it's a retail product, then let the product stand by itself. Think about it in this fashion, that if a consumer sees my product, he does not need anything else to prompt him to buy it. There is enough reasons for buying this product, right? It could be a price advantage, it could be I don't know, packaging advantage, it could be a health advantage, a lot of things. As much as people speak about health and awareness, I can tell you this, that in India, people, it's cool to eat healthy, be healthy, blah blah, but it is still all about taste. If your product is not tasting good, no matter how healthy your product is, the Indian consumer is going to be very difficult to convert. And then you're talking about very, very small market. So first look at big spaces, look at a big part of the market, uh, and then uh, uh, get into the niches. That's the one thing that I would definitely say.
Wonderful, Keyur, and of course we'll continue making introductions. And Keyur has been really, really helpful, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. How can people reach out to you if they want to talk to you about potentially getting into distribution, or reach out to TJ UK, let's say?
So I would request Shardul, if you could give my email ID to all of these people. Uh, uh, and I think that's the best way to get in touch with us. And of course, my office board number, happy to share that. Uh, so Shardul, if you could do that, would be
Yeah,
perfect.
I'll share your email
Right
ID in
now.
the chat box. Yeah.
So happy
Wonderful.
to
So
make
we have
introductions to all these people, and even to since you were mentioning that, so right now only webinars are possible because of social distancing. But what we used to do earlier was that we used to do these private exhibitions, so our own exhibition. So we would take a banquet space which is about 10,000 square feet typically, where we would bring all these new innovation companies, and we would call maybe 500 or 1,000 of our customers who we thought would be interested in this bunch of products. So once things are over, we'll be happy to start on that again, and where you get to speak directly with decision makers. So maybe GFI should look at this, and I'm happy to share with you how we went about doing this and building this entire thing. And it works wonders, because typically when people go into an exhibition, they are in that mode of rushing through the exhibition because they want to see every possible opportunity, every possible stand, and so they will give you only limited time. You do not know whether he's a decision maker or not, and the time spent on the stand is too less. There is less opportunity to taste and try the products, which is very important in the food business. Food business, nothing sells without tasting and trial. No matter what your product is, it always has to be tasted and tried. So doing an exhibition like this, where say as an example, there are these 10 or 20 or 25 new companies, and these people, the consumer, I mean not the consumers, but the retailers and the food service operators would come to this space. They would give enough time, knowing that there's only so much that they have to see, and if something catches their eye, they'll spend enough time, and you get an opportunity for a one-on-one. And it's a great way of introducing products.
Yeah. Before we close down the session, actually, I had one more question, Varun, from the audience, and that was like we focus mainly about local manufacturing and then its distribution, right? And those insights. What if somebody's importing these products currently, because this sector has grown way faster in the Western countries, and if they're importing it from Europe, from US, from Canada, from UK, from Southeast Asian countries maybe, and then selling it to the Indian market, can you throw some lights on those distribution kind of segments and channels and insights, and how they differ from what we've talked about today?
So typically, if I look at imported products, usually, not always, but usually they are more expensive because of the import duty. Unless you are importing from ASEAN or any free trade agreement, then you don't have to pay custom duty. or there's a reduced subsidized rate of custom duty, then you are price competitive in the market to local manufacturing. Otherwise, your products are always going to be more expensive, and I'm assuming that the reason why they are being imported is because they are niche and the same products are not being manufactured in India to the same quality standards. So, in which case you are talking about the complete top end of the market. So you're talking about gourmet stores, you're talking about modern trade, places like Nature's Basket would fit right uh, into on top of the bill for the retail stores or retail shelves that you want to be seen in. Uh, Otherwise, selling is all the same, so there is no difference. There used to be this phobia maybe about 10 or 15 years back, where imported was a preferred option just because people would turn it around and say, okay, made in which country, and if it's a first world country, then that product would fetch a premium. Um, but I think our Indian manufacturers and brand owners have done a fantastic job, and you see now that some of our Indian local products are selling at a higher price than imported competitors. Uh, there are so many such categories, right? You look at honey as an example. You get the choicest of honeys, though of course it does not fall into the plant-based, but just as a category, you have the choicest of honeys made right here in India and sold at fantastic prices, and the consumers are having enough of it and more. So otherwise, it's the same. But in imports, the only shortcoming is that uh, you're talking of very high duties if the product is outside of free trade agreement, and which makes the price go up. And the expectation of the retailers for imported products is always a higher margin expectation, right? Because traditionally importers have been traders, so they can't invest dollars in marketing because the brand is not owned by them. So the easier route for them to take was to give more margins to the trade. So you have to be mindful of that.
Perfect. So I think we are at the end of our session today, end of our time. But this was a very insightful session. We could cover so many different insights, and I'm sure the recording is going to help a lot of people in our community who couldn't make it today. So once again, thank you so much, Kero, for taking time out. And Varun, if you have any parting thoughts.
I just, seriously, thank you so much, Keyur. These are truly invaluable insights garnered over 2 decades of leadership in this sector, which is really, really, really seriously helpful to our audience, and really appreciate your time. And we'll certainly be
Give
making
back to the
introductions.
community.
And yeah,
Happy to give back to the community. So anytime, and I, me as a professional outside of TJUK, I started this business on my own. So I'm always eagerly looking at young entrepreneurs who are startups and founders, and finding some way of helping them build their businesses. It does not need to be all business. So they can all reach out to me, and I'm happy to help. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. For the community, the recording from the session today would be available on our YouTube channel, GFI India. If you just put that on YouTube, you'll find all our past webinars there as well, and our Smart Protein Summit, Future of Protein Summit videos from the past 2 years. So everything's available on our YouTube channel for open access. Thank you so much. Thank you, Keyur. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
take care, everyone.